Hello, it's Frank Weber again. Welcome to the forest once again. It's a Frankly Hairy podcast. So glad that you could be with me today and talk about some issues. Today I'm going to list some larger overarching issues from which we'll take subtopics and talk about them in our brief weekly podcast here. Before I do that, though, I want to discuss some housekeeping or clarification type topics. You may be wondering why I'm not going to be doing video on this podcast. I would like to, but as a solo podcast right now, I don't feel the need to do that. I would have to look at the camera or my webcam specifically the entire show. It'd be very difficult to look down at my notes and see what I have written out and planned here. So that's the reason why I'm not doing it right now. If we get some interviews on, then certainly I think that would be a great thing to do, to add some video. I thought about spicing it up by having video on there and having people look at me. I think I'm a fairly handsome guy. I think the women like to look at me especially. I also consider doing some episodes shirtless and whatnot, but for right now, I'll just keep my shirt on and keep the audio only. And then, there's another question here about will the party return? Frank Weber's Party, my previous podcast, still available out there where you find finer podcasts. At this point, I don't have any plans to bring it back. I would kind of like to in some ways, doing the Priscilla Barnes reviews and I was kind of doing some of the same stuff over there as well, topical discussions. But no, at this point, no, but I would never say never. There's always a chance it may come back in some form. But please check those out if you haven't listened to them before. And I was also thinking in the interim here about doing a Substack article. I call it article. They call it newsletter over there. I'm not really sure what the difference is. But I was thinking about doing an article on my catchphrase, welcome to the forest, because it's ambiguous on purpose, and I may do a discussion on that pretty soon as well. I think there's a lot of curiosity out there. I can kind of feel it. So I'll be happy to discuss that, but not here on this short show. So today I'm going to go over a not all-inclusive list of just general topics that I like to discuss here. And maybe not deep dive, but talk about some potential subtopics. And obviously there's things that can come up all the time, in the news, new subjects that go beyond anything that I have written here. And some of them are actually topics that I discussed a little bit on the old podcast, the Frank Weber's Party. Obviously, one thing we can talk about, probably going to do this somewhat sparingly, but there are very niche subtopics, if you will, very directed and limited that you could certainly discuss under here. But politics and religion are always a possibility, especially in an election that's coming up in November, a big election for our country. I certainly hope that people will educate themselves on candidates and vote for what best fits their values, and hopefully take in the entire big picture before they vote. That would be my biggest thing. We'll also talk about culture. There's concern in this country. There's a culture war, which means that there's a cultural divide as it relates to values and people's priorities for those values, how they balance them out. I thought we as a people used to do a little bit better job of that, but seems to be a lot more difficult these days for whatever reason. But that's certainly fair game. Pretty much anything is fair game here. I'll go into a couple of more here. I have some pet peeve issues as well, like I discussed on the old show. Things like overpopulation, which for a while was good economically for areas, but also increases traffic. We have a lot of puzzling traffic things that I see on the road all the time these days. Some of it I think is related to narcissism and maybe selfishness, and the priority isn't really so much on safety anymore. I may discuss some of those things. There's a lot of them out there, whether it's speeding or red left turn arrows, that sort of thing. I'm interested in business. I'm a capitalist, of course, through and through, but I sometimes wonder, what exactly are we doing with that? Do we have a good balance there? I've always wondered about business growth for what seems like the sake of growth, not necessarily organic, meaning your business has to grow in order to serve its customers, but are you just growing just to grow? That seems a little bit crazy to me. There's always conflict over things like interest rates, that sort of thing. By the way, I just want to share a quick joke for you today. I'm a big fan of a lot of the ladies at Fox News and Fox Business, and I was watching the Big Money Show at 12 o'clock today. I don't know, I always really enjoy that, but they had a guy on talking about Bitcoin, and he mistakenly called it Bitchcoin. So I thought that was unexpectedly amusing. I don't know if you can find a tape of that somewhere, but I certainly recommend it. Let's see. Lots of issues here. Big sports fan. Can talk about a lot of different leagues and sports levels. Football, baseball, pretty much anything. Obviously, I'm a golfer and a golf fan. I had a thing last year, I think it was about September, one of the shows we did. I'm also a fan of the LPGA tour, especially Lexi Thompson. And there's I kind of feel like there's a disturbing trend of them wearing what I called at the time long sleeve undershirts, but they're not actually shirts at all. They're just actually sleeves that they wear to protect the sun on their arms. And they're pretty tied up at the shoulder to keep them from falling down. Now I can get into a big discussion about that and why that's important and why it seems kind of wasteful, really, especially if you, being a fan of Lexi Thompson, she doesn't typically wear those things unless, I think I saw her do it one time when a front came through during the middle of a round and it got really chilly. But she doesn't wear those things at all, and she's a nice looking woman, and that's one of the reasons that I really enjoy following her on the LPGA tour. So I'm going to discuss those because there's nobody else in the world, Golf Channel, LPGA, anything, how that affects marketing of the league and people tuning in to watch LPGA whose ratings are never quite as good as the men's. Not that it's their fault or anything, it's just the way that it is. And so I really will get into some depth on that. Those sleeves seem like a big waste to me. But anyway, that's just one sports issue. I also will talk about things that are really nuanced and you don't hear about a lot. One of them, something that I'd like to try is, and this is going to be a surprise to some of you, is what's known as naturism, which in the United States we call nudism. And it's basically recreational activities like at a pool or a beach or playing volleyball where you're in the nude. celebrating the new body as God made you. That's the primary thing about it, but I can dive into a little bit more about it. Learned a lot of things reading a couple of manuals on it, actually. The big thing there is there's a lot of rules of behavior, and nudity does not equal sex. And humans have to kind of get over that concept, and there's a lot of really deeply ingrained stuff there as well. It's a recreational culture, essentially. Also learned a lot of things about certain activities. It's a waste to wear clothing, like those sleeves in the LPGA, for instance. But like the best example is swimming. If you're recreationally swimming, your suit's just going to get wet. And if you're on the beach or in a muddy lake, it's going to get dirty. So why do you wear anything at all? Makes pretty good sense to me. Other activities, kind of the same thing. The word, actually, I don't want to go on too long about this. Of course, we're kind of getting deep on time already, but the root word gymno, which you get gymnast and gymnastics, gymnasium from, means naked or unclothed. But in all those activities, you always see people wearing clothes. And of course, if you go back enough years, it wasn't always like that. Humans didn't always have access to clothes. The body in certain activities was naked, even in the time of Jesus, for things like baptism. And of course, he died naked, resurrected naked, all that stuff. But anyway, that's a very interesting topic and something that I really like to do myself personally. I don't know when, though. I mean, my wife is still got to work on her to kind of break her in there. But anyway, that's just an interesting thing to me. And I don't think that's... Well, I'm sorry. I think that's about all that I have written down here for today. So obviously gave you a lot of food for thought. This was second episode, basically just an introduction or an overview to everything. We can talk about pretty much anything in the world. I try not to be too controversial, although I may try to rock the boat a little bit on those. So anyway, that's it for episode 2, and we'll see you next time in the forest. Thanks for joining me. Remember to tell your family and friends, and check out all the materials I have out there as well, Substack and what have you. So see you then. Love you. Bye.